Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. I have the honor to moderate this panel. I'm Samer Abdus-Samad. I'm an associate investment officer at the International Finance Corporation, the IFC, and I also cover the creative industry investment side for West Anglophone Africa. But enough about me. Today is about our panelists. I let each one of them talk about themselves because I think that's the best way to really brings up why they are here for. But if I can say a few words about each of them in a short before we start. Our first speaker is Bolanle Austin Peters. Bolanle is not just an institution in Nigeria creative economy. She is someone that really invested time and energy to really build the Nigerian ecosystem. And I had the pleasure to meet her a few years ago, and I was obviously fascinated by the charisma, by the energy, but above everything, by her story and her commitment to the Nigerian creative industry sector. Please welcome Bolale Austin Peters.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think you've done a brilliant job of introducing me. I started out as a lawyer. I'm a cultural entrepreneur. I started 3 businesses in the arts. I have an academy. We've trained over 65,000 young Nigerians with partnership with MasterCard Foundation. I have a physical space called Terra Culture, where we hold exhibitions. We've done over 300 art exhibitions. We've had over 200 plays, and we've toured our plays around the world. And we have some of our films on Netflix and Amazon. One has done top 10 on Netflix globally. And then in terms of theater, our plays are toured all over Nigeria, all over Europe and America. And yeah, so this is who I am. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Lola. Our next speaker is Sharat Kuntuku. I didn't want to spell it wrong. Although I know him from a few years now. I thought about what to say about you, honestly, and I came up about, a data scientist genius that really knows his stuff thoroughly. I can't say much because I don't know nothing about data analysis and AI, but please shut up.
Thanks, Amir. So let's see if I can build a bridge to this other world. And it's a really tough act to follow, but I'm a professor in computer science at the University of Pennsylvania. We've been studying how AI could be used for social good broadly. And the reason I'm here is a few years ago, we started to look at how do people talk about mental health in movies, right? So how are people being portrayed when they experience depression, anxiety, psychosis, and so on? And we quickly found out that there are not enough portrayals. And even when there are portrayals, they're not really accurate, right? So we sort of broadened the scope of the problem, so to speak, and that's where Sunny in the previous panel was talking about looking at social norms, who is being shamed, why are they being shamed, how does it differ across different cultures. And we basically built this tool called MapGen in collaboration with our colleagues at USC, World Bank, supported by the Gates Foundation, that looks at over 250,000 movies across 160 countries. And it basically gives you a pulse, which is where I think the pulse comes from, of how norms are depicted across different cultures. We were also on a 2-week road trip to Nigeria, talking to creators, scriptwriters, and so on around AFREF. And until then, I was introducing myself as a AI dude. And then my good friend now, Johanna, basically said, hey, Sharat is not really a AI dude. He doesn't have tech bro energy. So that's the new identity, AI dude without the tech bro energy, right? So that's my introduction, Samir.
Thank you. So you see, he did it way better than I could have. So I'm glad I made this decision. Our next speaker is what I call within the World Bank group leadership, a real visionary. I think Renos Vakis has a real vision about what he wants to do, what he wants the AI to support, how he wants the AI to support development. And he's doing it in a way that I found very innovating, to the point that he's been pushing for these collaborations between the World Bank and IFC, which is something, it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of vision to do within our institution. Those who are inside knows what I'm talking about. So, Brenos, to you.
So first, can you all give a round of applause to yourselves for deciding to stay listen to the most boring session of the Cannes Film Festival? So thank you for that. So there's three things that you do every day when you make decisions. You think with very kind of automated way. You take a lot of shortcuts in using heuristics, sounds, colors, words that may come up that make you do or not do something. You also use your experiences and your own stories to interpret the world. That's your mental models. And you also use what everybody else expects you to do, the social norms, right? And how those expectations lead you to make a lot of your decisions. So we take this, in the World Bank, we put a very nerdish thing, well, how can we improve welfare around the world? How we improve, student outcomes, more people finding jobs, gender biases, climate change. So my team has been working the last 10 years with my 15,000 colleagues at the World Bank across all the governments that we support to bring a lot of this thinking into policy design and to basically take every operation, every project that the World Bank supports the government to make different policy designs and implementation, to use those ideas to basically make better policy and with better outcomes. So basically, that's what I do every day. So nice to meet you and excited to have this conversation.
Thank you, everyone. So the panel is about from pilot to scales. And one of the reasons why I wanted you here, Paula, is because the World Bank Group and TerraCulture has now a partnership, and we are looking to work together for, scaling up what you currently have been doing for the past 20 years at TerraCulture. So what I want from you, what I'm going to ask you is just to tell us about what have you been doing, how that has been impacting the people, how it has been supporting the creative ecosystem, and also a bit about your experience as a women entrepreneur in a male-dominated environment in Nigeria.
Well, thank you so much. What I'm going to try to do this morning is to focus on what we should be doing so that I don't take us back. Because as an institution and as a people, we've invested heavily in this space. Someone like myself, I started this journey 23 years ago when arts, culture were not commodities that anybody believed in Nigeria. So I opened this art space. Some people thought it was suicidal doing that. I invested a lot of money into the space, and the followership was very small. Nigerian music, Nigerian visual arts, Nigerian food, Nigerian performances were at the bottom of the ladder, so to speak. Nobody was interested. But I kept pushing this agenda. So today, when you look at the success stories of our visual artists, most of them started from TerraCulture's gallery. We had 22 art exhibitions annually for over 20 years, pushing that agenda, but nobody believed in it. But then when it coalesced into becoming an art movement, such as ArtX, and all the other movements that you see, people forget the beginnings. All these artists started because some people invested time and energy in believing and deconstructing the minds of Nigerians and international buyers that Nigerian art is solid. Nigerian art can rule the world. And the same goes for our music. In 2017, I remember Berna's mom used to have the exhibition of her daughter at TerraCulture, and she would tell me about her son. And she'd be like, oh, I have this son who is this great artist. And I'll be also like, yeah, right? Today, I look at what the success story is about. So what I'm saying is, for so long, people refused to see Nigerian arts and culture as an asset base. And I've been pushing that agenda for so long that it is not only an asset base, it is valuable. And we've demonstrated that by running an institution for 23 years, creating jobs, creating value, affecting the quality of lives of Nigerians. Because when you come to our space, we built a theater single-handedly. I borrowed money from Bank of Industry. Again, nobody was believing in it. And I said, we can change theater arts in Nigeria. There's a followership there. So we built this theater, 400-seater theater. In less than 10 years, the theater is too small. We have 10,000 people coming in a week to watch a play at Terra Culture. This was an industry that was dead a couple of years ago. So what Nigerians have been able to do is through individual efforts such as myself and so many others in the film space, people just keep pushing the agenda that one day somebody will see what we are doing. So IFC came on board simply because we've outgrown the infrastructure that we're using. So we need to expand again. Why? That infrastructure affects movie makers, it affects visual artists, it affects all the performing arts that you see, all the musicians, they all play at Terra Culture. There's always something called Trace Live, where all the big music stars perform every quarter in Terra Culture. And why Terra Culture? We have the best sound in Nigeria. Stage, the best. So from Olamide to Davido, everybody performs there every quarter. Nobody built this for us. I built it. So imagine, just imagine, if we had such stages around Nigeria, or if we just built one very big one, what would happen in terms of the conversions in ticket sales, conversions in terms of artists coming from abroad to play in Nigeria? And these are the possibilities, these are the things I want us to open our minds to. That if I could have done it, imagine if we had the institutional might and the investment supporting us. And a very good example is this CAN. What is happening here today? We are the heartbeat of this entire ecosystem that has been built. It's the artists, it is the directors, it is the producers. It is because we create that the hotels, that this lounge that we're in is thriving. They are all built around the creativity of us. But in Nigeria, we refuse to understand and accept that this is an asset class that needs to be supported so that it will impact all the other things around it. So my job here is to push and let us know that we as individuals, in our private capacities, from people like Ijoma, she comes here annually to Cannes. She has created an ecosystem in Nigeria from filmmakers. What they all do now is they have festivals in Nigeria. There's Afrif, there's ArtX, there's the Lagos International Theatre Festival. When we realized that singular efforts are not good enough, we brought ourselves into groups because we realized that we can move further when we come together as a group. Again, these festivals need support. Nobody is supporting us. We, individuals, go out to look for the money and make it happen in Nigeria. So we are saying that there needs to be collaboration. And collaboration for the arts needs to come in a different way from what you do with oil companies and other types of businesses. We need to think out of the box. You can't continue to tell me that I need debt to do arts. We have to be creative in the way we fund the arts. That if we as individuals are able to do it and we are making returns, because Terra Culture is a viable business entity. If we're able to make returns and yet banks are finding it difficult to invest in us, the question is something is wrong. And what do we need to do to make it right? That's why I'm here today.
You couldn't have said that better. And I just want to add to what you said, Bola, that you didn't touch upon this, but when the World Bank Group decided to collaborate with Teleculture and try to support, what left to me the biggest impression, besides all of you, whatever, all you said is already, but for me, finding the authenticity within Terra culture, within the stories that you're telling, finding real Nigerian stories. That is very important because it's the heart of the narrative around what we want, Africa stories to look like, what we want the role of women in your movies, but also in your theatrical plays to be. What's the messages that we are sending out? And I think that was extremely valuable. So I thank you for that. Sharat, I'll pass now to you, and I think we've seen with Terra Culture an example, right, of pilot that can scale into something big. And through your MapGen platform, you really have a powerful tool, right? You've been analyzing more than 200,000 movies, more than 18 million YouTube videos, which is honestly quite impressive. And clearly measurement is an important part of that. So, but I want to bring us to the reality as an Hollywood producer, as a creative, as an investor, as IFC, right? How do we use this data into something that can help us, make decisions and investments?
Yeah, I think for far too long, there have been a lot of dashboards that have been built, and those dashboards have been just used by the people who've built the dashboards, right? So essentially, we are trying to talk to individuals like the creators, the development officers, script writers, to understand what is it that they are looking for from this data, right? So for instance, measurement would work if it is very context specific, right? So if you're able to give the signal that each person wants, they would benefit from it, right? So for instance, if it is a producer in Nairobi or in any country, if they're able to get scene level statistics, right? So let's say they're writing the scene about a young teenage girl, their first relationship. Now, how does this portray the norms around gender equity? What are the norms in this culture? And am I amplifying them? Am I changing them? Or, getting that takes a long time, because often when creative decisions are made, for the audience to see it, it takes about 18 to 24 months, right? So with our platform, we are trying to basically forecast what some of those reactions could be. Because similar to what you were just saying, there's this huge history of data going back to decades around what people consume, how they've responded. So we can actually synthesize all of this and then give very context-specific details. For instance, if you're looking at, let's say, a commissioner at Netflix, then they might want to see, hey, I have 20 or 30 movies in my portfolio. Now, how are different gender norms being represented across the slate? It's not just one movie, right? So we're looking at different levels of scale, and we're trying to integrate these different levels in the platform itself. The other piece we've been trying to do is trying to look at measurement and giving these inputs where it is most useful, right? For instance, there are organizations like Women in Film, for instance, which have awards, right, for gender balanced roles. There are also funders like I think Eurimages, which have gender bonuses, right? So people are already tracking or looking to track these. What this tool or what we are trying to do with AI is essentially add this missing column using hard data, right? So we have all this content. Can you use AI to analyze this content and basically fill that column that people are looking to fill in a spreadsheet that is already open, so that we're not creating additional work for individuals, right? We don't want to create new workflows. A third thing that has really come up in some of the conversations in Nigeria is it's one thing to say, hey, for instance, in some of our data, we're seeing that Bollywood shames women almost 4 times more than Hollywood, right? That's bad, but so what, right? So what do we do with it, right? So the other thing we're looking at is creating evidence for the counter examples, right? I think this also came up in a previous panel. There are movies that have broken norms, that have broken stereotypes and broken narratives, and yet made a lot of money, right? So what are those examples, and why did they work, and where did they work? If you're able to create sufficient data-generated evidence, we are hopeful that financiers, development officers can greenlight projects like TerraCultures in the future with slightly less obstacles than you would have to face 20 years back, and that's our hope.
I'm excited. I don't know about you guys, so I found it very exciting, and I thank you for that. And I want to just stay on the topic, because I think even before in the panel one, I noted MTV Sugar was mentioned, and also I think we talked about My Better World, which are very gold examples of this work that you're doing, and how how you use the data that you have and actually produce analysis that is valuable. I mean, we've seen, even at the beginning of this video, we've seen the results, right? So my question to you is, well, it's kind of twofold. The first one is, how do we make sure that those examples are not just routine, but they actually become the norm? Because this is what ultimately we want to see, right? We want to see that, right? So that's the first part of my question. And then when we look at the investment cycle, from development to financial close, to use of blended finance and all of the tools that we have, what do you see as the major bottleneck, especially from the work at UPenn, the World Bank Group, and UCLA are doing together? But what's in your view the biggest bottleneck, and how can you support unlocking it?
And just being here for the last 2 days, it's very clear that the bottleneck is not production talent, right? The bottleneck is not also capital. Interestingly, there is money. The bottleneck is often closing the feedback loop, right? It's about basically, I think it comes back to what you were saying. There's a need for insight to go back into the system, and it's often a group effort. It's not a single person's thing, right? So what we are trying to do with the collaboration with the World Bank and USC is we're basically trying to build these artifacts, or build these tools that potentially anybody could use. One of them is AI norm mapping, right? So how could you use AI to scale identifying norms, right? The second is, I think Victor also talked about this. There are a lot of examples around how content changes norms, right? So you spoke about My Better World, MTV Sugar, and there have been studies, I think Abhijit Banerjee and so on, these are famous Nobel laureates, your colleagues, Victor, who've shown that exposure to these content actually reduces unnecessary fertility, or it improves female autonomy, right? So the challenge is this evidence is not shared across all the stakeholders. The evidence is not shared, or they're not being used by all the stakeholders. So we're building this platform so that the evidence can be shared across, right? So even if you're a producer in, say, Nollywood, or if you're a financier in Dubai, or if you're a content creator elsewhere, you could potentially use this platform to access a library of storylines or themes or scripts that have worked well, and how can they potentially be repurposed in your specific context, right? I think I'll pause there.
No, that's very interesting, and I think I want to take a step further to what you said and get to Reynolds, because now we're talking about wiring the evidence into the ground, into the real machine, which is something that I would like you to talk about, because it really touches upon the project, the budgets, and the people that are making the decision makers, right? So Reynolds, why don't you tell us a little bit about what wiring means on the ground in practice, and also how which advantages behavioral change has, and the position that the World Bank Group has in terms of enabling this environment that is providing the World Bank as a competitive advantage compared to the remaining institutions.
Yeah, I like how Bolanle put it. Let's talk about the future, because I think that's really where our lives are heading anyway. But so one point I want to say is that applying behavioral science in an institution, in a bureaucratic institution that works in policy like the World Bank, it's a very fascinating experiment. But what I will say is that by changing how our institution thinks, which is not just about let's put money and let's invest in buildings, but also let's invest in people's agency to make decisions, actually has made a lot of difference in how we work as an institution, but also how policy is done on the ground. The second thing is, there's three worlds we're trying to connect here. There is your world, which is the creator's work. I don't need to explain that to you. The second is the evidence, which, as we heard from the previous section, what you do, what the stories that you tell actually change lives. They change how people think. They change how people, make really important decisions in their life. So what we come in is, we work with policymakers, the most exciting, piece of, humans in the world who, try to make a difference, right, through different instruments that they have. And in some ways, what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring the stories and to interpret the stories. And what does it mean for a policymaker when they try to make a decision about the components of an intervention, whether to give cash transfers to this population or that population, whether to build a road here or there, whether to improve education or curriculum in a specific way? We want to bring all the evidence that we know exists and we have accumulated, not just as a platform that they need to subscribe and sign in and try to look at. We actually want them to, they're having coffee on their computer trying to create this document. We want that information to be kind of wired into that system. So what we're trying to build, and I think this is where we are in this kind of crossroads where technology is enabling us to do a lot of this curation in amazing ways. And with everybody, with all the, skepticism and, kind of issues that we talked a bit earlier about AI and technology, at the same time, a tool is a tool and, it's on us to make sure how we're using it. So what we're trying to do with this idea of the Pulse and the idea of, MapGen is to be able to tell my colleagues and through that kind of our government counterparts how to make better decisions at the exact point of the decision, not as a kind of a generic way. And just to give you some kind of numbers to put that in perspective, the World Bank invests about $1 billion every year on communication. The typical thing is, my team who does a lot of support those communication, and the typical scenario is I get a phone call from kind of one of my colleagues say, oh, I'm working in country X. Oh, we need to do a communication campaign. Can you help us? At that point, it's probably, we can do a lot of interesting things, but it's so late, like 3 years later of a, policy being rolled out to, exposed to thing of communication. We want that decision to happen before, because if you start thinking early on how you want to, what's the story of that interventions, then you're going to come up with many different ways of doing it. And if you do that, you're actually going to have impact, not just the minister who's cutting a tape, in the inauguration of a new school, but actually the communities that are going to be affected, the teachers who are going to be teaching, the students that are going to be there. The second bucket is the creative industry has about 50 million people around the world. It's actually the fastest growing industry in developing countries. We want to think of that as investing in people. We want to make sure not only, the amazing, learnings that we're getting from Hollywood are amazing, but we want actually people, hold on. So this is one of the strongest, the biggest storytelling instruments these days, right? If you think about movies, but also think about, social media, how we kind of communicate. Every single human actually has a lot of good stories to tell, and they're able to do it more and more. So we want to think of creative industry as a job creation industry that is going to be booming over the next, decade or more. And we want to make sure that people, kind of can make the decision of not only what the best story that they can tell, but potentially how they're going to reach different audiences. So all this to say, a lot of what we're trying to build, we're trying to bring a lot of the evidence and a lot of the insights we have. So we're building, in a way, a tool that is not a platform, but is actually, it's an accompaniment to every person who needs to make a decision in their ecosystem, be it my colleagues, be it a policymaker, be it somebody in the creative industry, to do what they do better and to, in a way, kind of enhance and augment what they do. The last thing I'll say on which touches a little bit on AI, what I'm finding with kind of our use of AI is that is not only for sure it's going to have to replace some things that can be automated. I mean, there's no question about that. But for sure it's going to augment a lot of the work we do in ways that, we haven't thought. What I'm finding exciting is actually we're discovering new things we have never even thought of as problems or solutions to the world. So in a way, AI is helping us think differently and think deeper and come up with ideas that potentially new discovery, potentially new ways, because new ways of telling a story, for example. And kind of the example I can think of is some of the stories that could work in India, while culturally may not be appropriate to bring them in Nigeria setting, but the behavior, the emotional, the psychological understanding of what connects people with a story, it's human, it's the same. And I think that's what I bring, I think, valuable to the storytelling. Stories can travel incredibly well and be adapted locally. So I think with this platform, we're trying to enhance kind of this future.
Which is very interesting, especially the last point out. That's when I called it at the start a visionary. That's why everybody is like seeing it now. But it's very, very interesting when, what you mentioned, we're looking at stories in India, we're trying to apply it in Nigeria. And that made me think, even when you create the perfect operating system, right, then human complexities interfere somehow and don't always make things go as planned, especially when you're trying to behave to change behaviors, right? Because of culture, because of norms, so how do you think you can navigate that through the platform and your work?
Yeah, again, it's really not thinking about a platform, and it's thinking more about a decision architecture that each of us will, has to, we all do every day, but then how can we support that? I'll give you a recent example from, so in Morocco, we were working with a $500 million operation to the government to improve its maternal health systems. And when we were first talking about communications, everybody went, okay, we'll do, public, kind of announcements, a couple of billboards here, and then, let's go home and then let's worry about, kind of improving, maternal health, vaccinations, all sorts of other, early childhood development things. We instead suggested, well, why don't we try to understand, the type of decisions that this operation is trying to do. Let's try to understand the context where those decisions are made. So when the mother decides to breastfeed for another month, or when a mother decides to, I'm going to, kind of how do I decide about childcare? And so in our diagnostics, we realize that some of these decisions happen in front of fathers with their own beliefs, in front of usually kind of the grandmothers who have, their own norms. So from, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, how they brought up their kids. It comes in kind of strong norms of what the community is expecting you to do. Maybe a religious leader is expecting you to do. So a mother actually is not making a decision by herself, even if she thinks she does, right? About breastfeeding. It's all these things together. So when you realize that, then you can think of a communication campaign that actually targets fathers in one way, potentially thinks about what's the role of a community, how do you embrace community to support a mother, how do you think about childcare differently? So when we started thinking and elevating the evidence that we were finding through diagnostics in Morocco, then that became actually probably 20 different interventions of communication and stories. Some of them came through, kind of the type of thing that everybody thought, okay, let's have these, kind of public announcements. But then we leverage social media, we leverage, positive deviants, positive messengers to actually support this message to multiplying kind of into the population. We also brought that into training for health, providers, for schools, to how they could start thinking about maternal health. So all of a sudden, from a let's do a communication campaign became a system of decisions for many different people, from the ministries that were involved to kind of the community leaders, to the families, to the women that, initially kind of the idea, okay, maternal health is about women. And I think what we found collectively over the last 5 years, for example, one incredible piece of data, early childhood childcare has increased from about 25% to 93% through this proliferation of all these kind of stories, if you want to frame it like that. And we also find out there were about probably half of the population of Morocco was exposed to some sort of discussion around the topic through this kind of layer intervention. So to me, this is when I speak about scaling a systems, I think of, it takes a village to do stuff. I mean, this is what it really means. It's kind of wiring, these ideas into kind of the collective kind of a decision-making architecture.
Fascinating. No, thank you. Thank you so much for that. I see, Shara, are you trying to say something?
Yeah, and that basically reminds me that a lot of what the potential of AI is basically democratizing the storytelling process, right? What was only feasible if you had a lot of infrastructure, physical infrastructure, is now feasible if you have a phone, right? That I think is one of the powers of AI that we could tap into when we are creating these mass campaigns.
Thank you for that. So I like to do the sort of circle of life, and then we get from pilot to evidence to the whole ecosystem. And I want to get back to you, Bola, before we open it up to the questions. I know you want to talk a little bit more about the stories that you know in entertainment. So why don't you tell us about that?
Okay. So for me, over the years, what we realized is that what we do essentially is about people. At the heart of everything that we do, it's people-oriented. What do we do in the arts? We create jobs for people, we create entertainment, and we also have a social impact on the quality of lives of Nigerians. That's essentially what we do. Now, in addition to that, in the past, most people saw this as a hobby. And we have demonstrated over the years now that it is not a hobby. It is income generating, especially if you look at the number of lives that we impact on a daily basis. Now, every time a young person comes to theater, they have to transport themselves there. We have to pay for it. We have to pay for lunch. And we also transfer skill sets to these people. And as we're doing that, we are impacting on the society. And if the job of foundations and multilateral institutions is to better the lives or to add value, then we have already demonstrated that that is going on. So the model already works. Now, the challenge that we're facing most times is that even when we want to tell our stories, the infrastructure is not there to support it. So what we're getting in Nigeria today is evidence is clear that people want Nigerian content. Go to YouTube. 20 million views, 30 million views for one content in 1 week. Yet, we don't have streaming platforms taking our movies. Why? Because what they want for the international community is not what the average Nigerian wants to consume. So are you saying that we should tailor the taste of Nigerians to the international community? Or are we saying that Nigerians need to fix how they get the materials out so that Nigerians can benefit economically from what they are creating? And I think that for me would be the focus. How do we ensure that going forward, all the creatives, the hundreds and thousands of Nigerians who are employed in this space, get an opportunity to get remuneration? Because now every single Nigerian that is creating content in the movie space is going on YouTube. Now, YouTube has become the new Netflix. essentially, people are also dumbing down on Nigerians because there are some people who want to tell social stories. We want to tell stories about police brutality, want to tell stories about the lives of the house girls in the house who don't get a benefit, these young children on the streets of Lagos. But we'll never get an opportunity to put them on platforms that are completely commercialized. The way they look at their algorithms, and their algorithms is telling them that this is the type of stories that sells internationally. So what we're doing is we're also boxing the reasoning of the average Nigerian creator, that all of you have to do movies in this type of way for you to become successful. That is an issue that we need to address. Then the other issues we need to look at include things like when we have moved as a people without anyone, we have congregated ourselves into a community, the visual arts group, the film storytelling group, the theatrical groups. How do we scale? How do we scale in an environment where we don't have basic infrastructure to put 10,000, 20,000 people that want to come? And you were there at the last theater festival. We had to create marquees to accommodate all the performances that came from all over the world. People want to come to Nigeria, contrary to what people are saying. But when the infrastructure is not in place to ensure that they're okay and that even the performers themselves are okay, how do we generate that traffic? Am I the one to do that? Can we collaborate to ensure these things are done? So that's why the meeting with IFC is very good if you're coming in to support in terms of infrastructure. And the meeting of other multilateral institutions are very important because what you do is you need to start coming to a place where you de-risk things that I cannot do personally. Those things that make me not able to scale. Where are the institutions that can help buffer that for the average Nigerian storyteller? And that is what is missing. As a final point, when it comes to skills acquisition, there was a gap, a massive gap. We realized that we were training a lot of young people, but the number of young people that were not skilled outweighed the numbers that we were doing. So what did we do? We approached MasterCard Foundation and said, look, this is the scenario. I've been able to train 200, 300 artists. They have become superstars. A lot of the superstars just came through our doors, but I'm still limited in my reach. So by sitting with us, this is another role. Just sitting with us, analyzing with us, discussing with us through research. We came together and said, listen, maybe what we need is online intervention. How do we reach these students who are sitting in Kano, who are sitting in Ogun State, who don't have the money to transport themselves to a school? So the challenges were multiple. Even if we created this platform, how are they going to access it? If we have physical spaces, do they have the money to come to these physical spaces? So by sitting with them, we came up with many options that ordinarily I wouldn't have been able to do alone. So the role of these institutions is not always about money. It's just also at times just about sitting with us and brainstorming and helping us see through the weeds that what is possible. And what we did come up with that was that we now created an LMS combining all the curriculums of universities and merging it with our own practical experience. We created a learning management system online. MasterCard funded it, and we don't charge any student a dime to go to school. So they don't pay a penny. All this is funded by MasterCard Foundation. And what we now found out was that there are a lot of girls in the North who are selling basic things like makeup, henna, but they don't have an opportunity to photograph very well because they don't know how to light. So we taught lighting, we taught sound, we taught set, we taught them skill sets that we know they don't need people to employ them because they can self-employ. Those people today, through the imams in the villages, the imams are the ones now supporting them to go for education. Whereas when we were going there, the thought was that the North will not allow their girls to go to school. They are the ones encouraging these ladies, go to school. We can see that you're making sales now with these little things that you're studying. But it took a meeting of minds. And it's that meeting of minds that we require a lot of times, as opposed to always just about the, the cash. So thank you. I don't know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please give Bola a round of applause. I mean, there is very, I mean, for me personally, I've seen what you've been doing in Nigeria, and I think, especially when we as IFC and then in collaboration with the World Bank Group decided to invest into the creative economy, which was something completely new to us, we realized the impact, the economic development impact that this industry has on the people. And so, as you said, it's not really about just the cash, it's more about the ecosystem, it's about development, but also we want to bring out to light cases of businesses that are profitable, that can scale up, and we want to build the confidence of commercial banks to say, okay, I can help these businesses grow. We don't need the IFC at some point, because in all other developed countries, this happens. So that's where we, as the World Bank Group, are trying to get, and I think thank you for your contribution to that. So I will open it up to questions. I don't know how about the time we have. But we started 10 minutes late, no? Okay. Let's see how many questions we have. Please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, and it's been a very interesting conversation. My name is Ijoma. I am the founder of NIFS. And I want to thank Bolanle and, of course, all the other speakers for the insightful conversations. Sitting down listening to Bolanle and what she's built over a 23-year period was just giving me goosebumps, because we're also coming from an industry that has before now, been male-dominated. Women didn't have the kind of access to be able to do certain things. They were more confident on men. And so to see a woman who has been, consistent in building institutions, I think that is very inspiring and very commendable. So I want to thank you for all the contributions you've done, in the industry. And then to my question will be, in terms of where we find ourselves now, like you said, I listened to your earlier panel at the Marché this morning, and we can see that a lot of people within our space, the producers especially, do not have an output, for what they are making. So there's the supply is more than the demand. And then you're seeing people going to YouTube, and it's increasingly reducing the standard of what people are producing, because what Netflix and Prime Video will hold you accountable to in terms of your technical delivery, in terms of your quality control, YouTube is not going to see that. So I'm just wondering, is the World Bank looking at also supporting distribution pipelines and infrastructure? Because she spoke a lot about infrastructure, but we are in a place where distribution is a huge, huge issue for us locally. So I would like to know, I also want to hear Bolanle's thoughts on that, and if there are any plans to support return on investments, because if people are investing but they're not getting their money back, and I don't think that's a good place to be as an industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we respond, maybe I'll see if there are more questions so that we can, please go ahead.
Hi, hello. Well, thank you very much to the panel, because I resonate a lot with everything you said, because I think that is part of the future that we want to build and create. So thank you very much. I'm interested to hear about the three of us, about what you are thinking about collaboration and the power to put different but also align strategies and countries together working with. What is the vision of the collaboration? Because we started exactly with a pilot training department in our organization doing and creating capacity building for indigenous storytellers, and now we have a movie for 28 countries. So I'm really interested to know for indigenous all around the world, but I want to hear about the power or what is the strategy for collaboration and make this for each of you.
Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Brenda Garba. I'm a producer. Quick question, Bola. I like that you mentioned what you're also doing in northern Nigeria, because I'm based in northern Nigeria in Abuja, and we are creators there. But everybody that comes into Nigeria to support filmmaking always end up in Lagos, and they forget that there are a group of us who are equally as talented and in making films. Our biggest struggle in northern Nigeria, we've sort of found a way to conquer the culture problem, and they are more interested in telling authentic northern stories or indigenous language stories. It doesn't matter what language, Hausa, Igbo, or Yoruba. So my question is there room for support for filmmakers, especially in my region, from production or development, any kind of funding, development to production and distribution? That's what we're looking for. I mean, I don't have to talk about my personal experience. A lot of us know about it already. But yeah, that's our biggest challenge, distribution, like Ijoma says. We would like to have some sort of assurances so that people that are investing in us and believe in our stories get their money back and they come back and give us more money.
Any last one, I think, and then we can go to the answers. Do I see any hands? No? Okay. So, and I think the last questions is not just to Bola. I think it's something that we can cover as well. So why don't we start with the first one, please?
I can't remember the first question.
It was,
It was her.
Yeah.
It was about distribution.
Distribution, and it was directed to the World Bank, right?
Yeah, so
In
let the
terms
World
of
Bank answer,
financing,
yes.
and then
Yeah, the questions were mostly about money, so
Talk to them.
The irony questions about money is to Samer. So, but
I'm not in the position today to.
no, I mean, I think the quick thing to say, of course, and on the serious side, I mean, so the institution of the World Bank that Samer works is the one that works with the private sector, and they are doing a lot of this kind of pushing the future of how it could, finance could help de-risking and also leverage to bring other investments to support some of these things. So I think that's a very kind of critical kind of aspect. And also like Bolanle's point on, we were chatting last night that some of the best job in the industry, the best paid job actually is not acting necessarily, but is more about doing lightings and doing stagecraft and doing, plumbing and a lot of other job generation aspects that are happening. So, and I love that, her point, which I completely agree, that, the restaurant here should give everybody a free round of drinks because we're bringing a lot of business, right, with your work. I guess a couple of the other questions, one on kind of collaborations, absolutely, let's talk. But we are talking, for example, clearly Nigeria, has, a lot of there's a lot of excitement with all the things that have happened there. But we are talking in the Middle East, for example, with the Emirates. We're talking about kind of the Middle East, kind of a more, and the industry there. There's a lot of interest. Happy to talk about, other opportunities. I mean, the team, works in many creative industries around the world. And clearly our vision is a global vision, is not just a specific market. I guess the last point was, and I'm also, I love how I'm learning all the lingo of the creative industry. So eyeballs and green lighting. So in terms of eyeballs, I mean, one practical use that I find for us is that, through the government engagement, I feel we have a lot of space to increase eyeballs and distribution of content. And part of the tools that we're building is to really actually create predictions of what content that already exists could actually be reused very quickly through a lot of government engagements, right? Trainings and schools and, all sorts of engagement. And I think that's because this is not just the government; it's the government for citizens. So I think we can probably, hopefully, find a lot of content, and this is what we're finding. There's a lot of amazing stories that we can predict their impact in a way because of all the nerdy stuff that Victor and the rest of the team are doing. But we can actually explore ways to reuse that, in addition to think about the future of the new stories and the elements that they could have to have impact. So there's a lot of things that are exciting going forward, I think, that we could do.
Right. So let me just address the northern, what you had mentioned earlier. I do know for a fact that the Bank of Industry is giving funds to fund managers to identify filmmakers from the different parts of Nigeria, so that it's evenly distributed. So what they do is they're giving funds to fund managers to manage on their behalf. So someone like you from the north, you'll benefit even faster because they recognize that most fund managers are in Lagos. And they have very few people in the north, south, east, and south, south. So we can talk about that later. That for me, I have that information I can give to you. And then I wanted to say something about the AI that you guys were mentioning earlier. I think it's very important. The collation of information and data about movies and the kind of the trends and the things that work is absolutely important for us, because typically we work from just, oh, I'm fascinated by this. There's no data to support that, right? So if we have people that are collating data on our behalf, it begins to guide even the idea of us doing films that commercially will not be viable, and then which also discourages investors from wanting to invest in us. So I think this is also a very useful role for the bank, and I personally am very excited about that because it gives us the back end. And I also want to commend the IFC for thinking forward, because I know that a lot of institutions are so grounded in their behavior that it's very difficult to shift. And they are beginning to shift to recognize that at the heart of everything that they're doing, it's people. And if we can't see the impact on ground, and we have so many young Nigerians saying this is the sector we want to be in, and the sector is not lucrative or is making money for us. And you all, I know how hard Samir, Biodu, Dan, and co are working to ensure that if Nigeria becomes the pilot, if they're able to crack it and see how we can fund infrastructure, fund education, fund access, fund distribution in Nigeria in a sustainable manner, it changes all of Africa. And for me, that's why I'm here. We have to make it work. And it will happen by the grace of God.
I hope so. Otherwise, I wasted my past 3 years of work trying to... No. But just in that as well, with the collaborations that we're putting together with Victor and Reno's team, I think the goal is to try to get financing also for projects that are outside of the mainstream, right? So even north of Nigeria, areas of Kenya that usually are not reached out by financiers. And distribution is clearly the biggest bottleneck in the African market. So that's very, very important. But we could also talk about post-production. Like, all the movies goes to South Africa to do post-production, and we don't have real places in Nigeria. So yes, we want to work on the whole ecosystem, and we want to build, and we are hoping to build, a first example of Nigeria and of Nollywood. Were any other questions? I've lost track of the questions, and we need to wrap up.
Thank you.
Are we good? Oh.
We're solving that distribution.
Oh yeah, we can talk about that time later, and we so let me thank our speakers and thanks everyone for being here today with us. I'll thank you.